lighting is like, because I don't want to wear my glasses. I think I'm going to need to put my glasses on. Okay.
From many places we have come. Bearing the grief of loss, we have come. Holding stories longing to be heard, we have come. We have come this day called by death, yet ever drawn by life. We have come this day with sorrow, with gratitude, with pain, with feelings that have yet to find their voice. We come with questions that may have no answer. We come this day along many paths, but gather as one community, bound by love and memory, joined in care and in hope. Spirit of life, gracious and loving God, be with us in this time, be with us in this sacred space as we come together to remember Donald William Seymour. Good afternoon. I am the Reverend Heather Janulis, and it's my honor to serve as the parish minister here at the Winchester Unitarian Society. On behalf of our congregation and Don's family, I welcome all of you to this service of remembrance. Some of us are attending here in our beautiful sanctuary, and some are attending virtually via our live stream. Live streaming friends, please visit our website, winchesteruu.org, to find the order of service. It will be on the front page in the upper right-hand corner. Please also take a moment to sign the virtual guest book by sending an email to guestbook@winchesteruu.org with your names, where you are viewing from, and any short message you would like to share. For those on site or live streaming locally, please join us for a reception after the service in the Sims room located at the back of the sanctuary. In respect for our time together, I ask that we now take a moment to turn off all cell phones and electronic devices. Let us continue our service by lighting the chancel chalice. We are not alone today. We are joined by the presence of all those who have already passed from this earth. In this hour of remembering, our grief for many and our grief for one intermingle. These losses are inseparable. Their joining is appropriate. In this time of recalling those who've gone before, we especially remember Don's sister, Barbara, his parents, Harry and Betty, and his nephew, Adam. Our dead live on in our memories. Their lives are now our lives. As each life is part of the one life, so is each death, mourned in all death. With the lighting of this chalice, we honor the sacred spark in every human soul as we, the living, remember and celebrate one life, the life of Donald William Seymour. Rise in body, rise in spirit to join in singing hymn number 21 in the gray hymnal, For the Beauty of the Earth. Don Seymour was born Donald William Seymour on January 5th, 1950, in Syracuse, New York. Many years later, in a conversation with a police officer, which is another story for another day, when asked what the W stands for, Don replied, "Wishbone." So in time, Wishbone became the family alias for a password. Don was the second of 8 children born to Harry and Betty. Both Betty and Harry came from large Catholic families in Ilion, New York. Harry was a political scientist, and Betty cared for their growing family. With us today are siblings John, Jim, Kathy, Betsy, Linda, and Mary. When Don was 2 years old, the family moved to McLean, Virginia. One event had a profound impact on Don and his family. His 3-year-old sister Barbara died of viral encephalitis when Don was 6 years old. This loss was a pain that cast a shadow over the whole Seymour family for generations to come. When it was time for Don and Deb to name their daughter, they chose the name Barbara as a way of honoring Don's sibling who died too young. The Catholic Church was very much part of the Seymour family. Along with attending Mass, Don and his siblings went to Catholic school. Don was one of those students who struggled in school, not because he wasn't intelligent, but more because he was very bright and found school boring. As a result, he was often in trouble. He ended up attending a number of high schools, eventually graduating from Langley High School in the late 1960s. I now invite Don's brother, Jim, to offer his memories about their shared childhood and beyond.
Thank you. Good afternoon. When Deb first informed the Seymour siblings that Don's celebration would have one of us speaking for the entire group, I said, okay, I can handle that. I'm up for it. I'm ready. Well, little did I know. I sat down to compose our collective thoughts, and I hit a brick wall. I froze. Nothing made sense. Tears followed, and the realization that my big brother was gone finally set in. As I'm sitting dumbfounded with time just ticking by, tick, 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 I start to smile. I hear something in the distance. Pause. It's Don's contemplative voice. Take a deep breath, Jim. Things will work out. They will work out. Vintage Don, the long, drawn-out conversation where you think he's lost on the other end and he's still there and he comes back right when you're ready to hang up. He was there. I could picture his face, and I said, thank you, brother. You're still helping me. One thing that we all know, Don loves his children. Whether it was watching, coaching, participating in sports, school, or life activities, that was what was important to him, his family. When we were growing up, Don played basketball at the end of the driveway religiously, often with siblings or neighbors. The games of choice were one-on-one, horse, and 21. Don was a strong competitor and ruled the court once he got to high school. Other popular activities growing up were wiffle ball, daily bike rides to the pool, swim team, hanging out. High school saw Don playing football until he blew his knee out, basketball, which he also continued at George Mason University, and later rugby, where we played together. Don, always my mentor, tutor, and guardian. I was a young 16-year-old playing rugby with 35-year-old men. Don and Deb married in June of 1975 and were living in Falls Church, Virginia. I was at the house one Saturday or Sunday, whatever, helping Don work on his car. You know, I'm like 16 years old and helping my big brother. Well, later on during the day, Debbie said, you guys need to go to the store. So we'd go to the store to get some groceries. And as we're walking out the door, we get this Don gets an explicit instruction to get a good bottle of wine. So we get to the store, going around, get all the groceries, and Don's looking at bottles of wine and looking at another one, and, we're there for a few minutes. So finally, he picks this bottle up and puts it in the cart. And I said, okay, good. And I said, I'm going to learn something here. I asked him, I said, how did you know what was considered a good bottle of wine? He looks at me like I got two heads and I'm dumb. And he says, Jim, it's easy. 1, it has a cork. 2, it's on sale. What's not to like? Life lesson. He was always teaching me life lessons. Somewhere around this time frame, Deb and Don decided he would return to school, supported by Debbie, for an advanced degree. This led to a move to upstate New York and attendance at Cornell University, where Don obtained a advanced degree in hospital administration, and ultimately turned it into a successful career, and he was in high demand. John thinks he started his negotiating skills at 5. Betty, the mom, placed a last brownie between John and Don and said, share it, boys. Don looks at the brownie, looks at John. One guy cuts and one guy picks. The start of his negotiations. For the most part, I believe the Seymour sisters considered us as having 2 families, growing up with the older boys out of the house when they were still small. When we were all older and there were multiple nephews and nieces, we had holiday get-togethers and week-long beach gatherings. The sisters, nephews, and nieces considered Don the fun uncle. I must admit there were a lot of evidence to support this. Although, John, I don't know what you and I were, chump change. Don was the biggest kid of everybody. I mean, he made the kids look small, kid-wise. He was the mischief maker, and he was the instigator. He was fun-loving and adventurous. He would start all the squirt gun battles by sneak attacking the kids off the balconies. He'd organize and direct the soccer games or frisbee games on the beach. He'd lead out the boys to go putt-putt golfing. I don't think you went putt-putt golfing, did you, Eileen? Almost all endeavors ended up with ice cream cones for everyone. His biggest claim to fame was as the sweet tooth guy. A morning trip to the beach donut shop didn't mean 1 dozen, it meant 2 dozen. He had to make sure there was enough for everybody. And then a trip to a convenience store meant sorry here, bag's not working well. It meant a bite-sized candy while you were in line waiting to get your stuff filled. And then, on the way home, if it was a really good day, there was a bag of M&Ms, and everybody participated. Any kids that went got to participate. Small wonder he always had companions. Don may not have always colored between the lines or followed the paint-by-number chart, but he left us with a pretty picture and fond memories. We miss and love you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. After high school, Don enrolled at George Mason University. In 1971, when he was dating a woman who lived in Williamsburg, he was encouraged to give a ride to a Marymount student named Debbie Shellman, who had a boyfriend in that city too. The occasion was a James Taylor concert. The drive to Williamsburg was a bit chilly as a result of Don's VW Bug having no heat. Don asked Debbie out, but she said no, considering their other relationships. But they stayed in each other's orbit, eventually beginning a relationship a few years later. Debbie and Don married on June 21st, 1975, the first day of summer. They settled, as was named, in Falls Church, Virginia. At the time, Don was still an undergrad, leading a team of counselors at a residential center for troubled youth. Don became inspired to pursue a graduate degree. Despite a lousy undergraduate record, glowing recommendations and high GRE scores brought him to Cornell University, which meant a relocation to Ithaca, New York, as Jim named. Here, Don engaged with academics in a new way and excelled. At graduation, he received the most job offers in his class. Upon receiving his MBA from Johnson Graduate School of Management, Don chose a position in Atlanta as a healthcare consultant, bringing them closer to Deb's family. As we remember Don and his success in the business world, it is fitting to name those who were important mentors to Don. They include Hal Bierman, Dick Schnickel, Fred Woodmaster, and Jill Aubrey. Deb and Don welcomed their first child, Thad, in 1980. The family grew with the birth of Barbara in 1982. A new consulting position in Boston for Don brought the family to Winchester in December of 1984. Sam, their third child, was born in 1988. While Don and Deb faced the stresses of young parenthood, they found many ways to relax, taking walks together, swimming, camping, running, biking. They enjoyed a good circle of friends. Together, they worked well as a team. Don also had a number of individual interests. An avid reader, Don loved historical and detective novels, and when he wasn't exercising or playing sports, he also enjoyed watching basketball and soccer games on television. I now invite Barbara and Sam to share their memories of Don.
My father was a great public speaker. He helped me with all of my remarks. Fortunately, not these ones. In our nuclear family, we talk about people being dreams in the clouds. When they've left the earth or have yet to arrive. The year my daughter was born, it became clear to me that the father I knew was up there in those clouds. The body that remained was a nightmare. I'll never fully understand what happened. I've had many years to be angry, confused, and heartbroken. But today, I'm trying to think about the stories that made that man in the clouds laugh and cry and duck his head in embarrassment, vehemently protest, or simply feel pride. So, some of the most formative places and things in my life are because of Don. How many of you would believe it was actually him who first brought me and Sam and Thad to this church? He took me to Camp Wawanok for my first visit in our matching pink shirts and khaki shorts, falling in love with Sebago blue. There weren't many father-daughter pairs in the audience at Alvin Ailey, but I loved to dance, so there we were. Nearly every boating adventure went awry when Don was in charge. So it isn't surprising that I learned to captain my own vessels, quite literally. And then there was college. I hated everything about that application process. So we sat in front of the fire, made a spreadsheet, typical, logical Don, everything laid out. The decision was easy, and I don't think it was what he would have chosen for me. His pride wanted something better, but better. But he kept it under wraps. He wanted to be part of our lives no matter what it took. He ate sunfish when Thad and I wanted our fresh catch of the day. I think maybe he spit it out, but I didn't know that at the time. He learned to ski because when you have kids in Winchester, that's what you do. In an attempt to get to the best of the morning snow, because that was done, if you were going skiing, you better be on that first chairlift, except when you're carrying a sleeping 6-year-old on the ice and you fall and break your leg. Many years later, he broke his arm, mountains of Honduras, riding horseback with me, which he should not have been doing, but I kind of forgot that, anything he did, like, I got this, sure, let's go. He fell and broke his arm. He didn't tell any of us because he didn't want to ruin the trip. So, bit of a theme here. He started and resumed biking and running and swimming so he could do triathlons with me. We went on awesome family trips, and he took up scuba diving so he could go with all his kids. As Jim said, not so good at coloring between the lines, so I think he drove the guides absolutely insane. He wasn't necessarily with us. He was swimming this way, going below depths we were allowed to, we'd been trained to. He didn't like following the rules. Part of being part of our lives meant that he would entice us to keep him company on work trips. So one was near the Grand Canyon, and to train, we went troopsing up Johnson Hill, for any of you who know that. It's a good hill around here, with our frame packs on. I'm sure we were quite a sight. And so when we emerged triumphant from the canyon at 10 a.m., and he called his sisters to gloat, they said, "Don, did you enjoy the view?" Did you see the sunrise? He was a little competitive, as you'll hear throughout these remarks from everyone today. Being part of our lives meant supporting our work, in my case, quite literally. When I was in for my first ever desk job, I wrote what I thought were some very eloquent sponsorship requests, and he sent in a check. What did Don Seymour and Associates have to do with my organization's mission, After School for All? Absolutely nothing, but he sent in that check. He paid for things, no matter what. That was that's what being a father meant. It didn't matter how old we were. So there was one Father's Day when Sam had just gotten his first job. We were out in La Jolla, California, had a lovely Father's Day brunch, and we're sitting there. The check's been delivered, and about 15 minutes later, Sam and I are wondering, like, can we leave now? Well, we were just waiting for him to pay. I didn't have a job, so I blame it on Sam. There's so much I wish he could be here for crypto, autonomous vehicles, the rise of women's sports, opportunities to continue writing checks to the nonprofits I work at. And there's my daughter. She's proud to be in this speech, and there's no words for what he's missing. So, Don, I hope you found a comfy cloud, and finally, some peace.
Just want to point out that Thad has deposited a Larry Bird Night t-shirt right in front of me here, and by no coincidence, but not planned, I'm also wearing my Larry Bird socks today. Recently, my partner Kathleen's grandfather asked me if my dad and I were close. I started to say yes, but realized in that moment that I'm not so sure. We shared love and a strong bond, but I'm not sure we ever reached a level of vulnerability and truth required to be close to someone. Similarly, a lot of my friends and family have asked me what happened to my dad, and I've recently realized that I just can't answer that question logically. I don't believe we'll ever fully understand the chemicals in his brain and the external and internal forces that led to the decisions he made over the past decade or so. These were the darkest reaches of the dichotomy of my father. The reaches which culminated in him passing away, alone and unhoused for the night. A simple explanation isn't possible, but nor is it the point. The point is that we can all feel it. The point is that we all carry some amount of the weight of the world, some degree of sorrow and pain on our shoulders. The point is to look upon each other, upon those suffering in public, those with addiction, with cognitive disorders, with a bit more love and kindness than perhaps we did the day before today. The point is to say I love you, to practice vulnerability, to acknowledge and address our own and others' suffering, and perhaps most importantly, to cherish each other. The dark exists, at least in some fashion, to amplify the light. So I want to spend the next few minutes leaning into nostalgia and the other side of the dichotomy that was my father. I'll share some raw memories and feelings that remind me of the gentle, devoted to a fault, steady as a rock father whom I love so dearly. In no particular order. Warm, balmy, cricket-filled Boston summer nights, flashlight tag with the whole neighborhood, silence punctuated with shouts and laughs, the outsized presence of my dad creeping through the night to catch us, joyful terror. The sound of a dial-up modem, a fax machine printing, Diet Coke over ice, and impatiently installing new computer games from a CD-ROM. New hobbies with mixed outcomes, the anticipatory excitement of building a remote control airplane that we just could not ever get to fly. The smell of gunpowder lingering after successful model rocket launches. on the old Ambrose soccer field. Baggy suits from Joseph Banks and wind-up wristwatches. Quietly holding on to the belief that he was a low-key famous athlete, evidenced by the fact that he had sat next to Larry Bird on an airplane multiple times. Playing basketball with him at the T-shaped intersection next to our house, trying desperately to prevent him from scoring. That same intersection soaking wet while practicing my left-handed layup in the rain, motivated to make him proud. An icy wintertime day, laughing at one of his impractical sports cars spinning out on the ice. Meeting him and my mom on a work trip in San Francisco, watching him speak confidently in a room full of people at the conference, nailing the formula and the delivery, holding everyone's attention, eliciting laughs at just the right moment. Wood smoke, leaning against his scratchy wool robe by the fireplace in the winter, summertime in Maine, hunting barefoot for birch bark, and sleeping by the campfire. Living alone for the first time, thousands of miles away in California, angsty and uncertain, reassured through knowing that my dad's steady hand was just a phone call away. There's so much more I'd like to say, but I'll leave it at this. A dichotomy is not necessarily a paradox. It can be hard to remember someone in two very different ways. But I want to invite you all to remember both the dark and the light of my father. There is no shame in suffering, and there's great pride in loving openly and vulnerably. I love you, Dad.
Thank you, Barbara and Sam, for your powerful witness. Deb and Don followed in the family's footsteps, bringing the children to Catholic Mass. But even though they were raised in the tradition, it was not a good fit. Friends of Don recommended that they visit here, the Winchester Unitarian Society, as Unitarian Universalism was more closely aligned with their values. They joined in 1988, raising the children in the congregation and becoming active in the community. Deb remembers the sermon Don once preached in the sanctuary on Father's Day, affirming that Atticus Finch was a perfect role model as a father. One of Don's primary inspirations was music. Deb observes that music was his poetry. He was a fan of musicals, bringing the kids to Cats and Les Miserables, and rock and roll. Bob Dylan, John Prine, Leonard Cohen. Life was really busy for the Seymours. Don became a solo practitioner in 1990. Outside of work, their calendars were full with Montessori school, Barbara's ballet, social events with friends, and Don coaching the children's sports teams when he wasn't on the road for work. Don was an excellent coach, motivating the players with positive reinforcement. As a family, they spent a lot of time outdoors and at the beach. I heard some of those stories today. Don was a fun playmate with his children. Deb and Don were very conscious about how they parented. Underneath the surface, though, Don was struggling. He did not have an easy childhood, which was perhaps a catalyst to Don entering his teen years very angry. In Deb's words, he tried to white-knuckle his way through life, prizing fortitude as a virtue. But alcohol became a covert coping mechanism, the primary help he sought as time went on. Sadly, Don's nephew Adam died unexpectedly in 2010. The family then faced significant stress when Don's mother became ill with cancer and in 2012 concluded that she would not seek additional treatment. Don's father died by suicide and his mother entered assisted living. These challenges pushed Don closer to the brink. At this point, Don was rather distant from his family, the many years of traveling for work taking their toll. Don's mental health struggles eventually caught up with him, causing him to lose his bearings. His challenges remained private at first, but in time, Don lost everything. Despite the obstacles of addiction and mental illness, he kept trying to return to his family and the life he once had. These years were painful for many, for anyone who loved Don and remembered the best parts about him. Don's breakdown occurred before the birth of his grandchildren, Aaliyah in September of 2016 and Regan in August of 2022, so they did not have a chance to have a meaningful relationship with him. He never even met Regan. Don Seymour died in Los Angeles of an assumed heart attack on October 12th, 2023. And so we've gathered here to remember him and to honor our time with him. As we cherish what was good about Don and meaningful about his life, remember him for his kind and gracious nature. Deb remembers how Don's work connections, from the cleaning staff to members of upper management, benefited from his kindness, from the way he treated everyone with dignity. Remember Don for his intelligence. Don's brilliance set him apart from many others in ways that was both positive and challenging. Don was a remarkable leader, a quality made stronger by his quick and insightful mind. And remember Don for his tremendous sense of humor. In his lightest moments, Don Seymour brought great joy to the world. We remember Don Seymour. I now invite us into a time of shared silence, so we may each welcome our own memories of Don into this sacred space. Amen. Our love for this family is going to show in this song, so we would welcome a sing-along, if you would.
See Allow me to begin by thanking the Seymour family for granting me the privilege of sharing a story about my friend Don. Early on in the period that Don coached Sam and his friends, including my son Tom, he took the boys to an out-of-town soccer jamboree, a first for many of them and for me. Our boys were on the field before our first opponent arrived, many of them wearing gear with lots of miles from older siblings, and in some cases, a tad too small or too big. Their jerseys had numbers, as required, but no names. Their pregame warm-up routine looked a lot like recess at Ambrose. Lots of laughter, very little business. I was chilling from my preferred viewing position, apart from the other parents, about as relaxed as I can get. And then the other team arrived. The players were wearing uniforms that looked like brand new gear, including jerseys with numbers and names. The coach was similarly attired and was carrying an equipment bag the size of a small sedan. Their warm-up routine was a highly choreographed affair. All business, very little laughter. In a matter of minutes, my chill evaporated, my heart rate rose, my grip on my Dunkin' coffee tightened. So I looked to see how Don was reacting. I regained some measure of composure when I saw that Don remained as cool as a cucumber and that everyone was on their best behavior. Opposing coaches shaking hands, opposing parents making small talk. In short order, then the referee, who was just a few years older than the players, fired up the game. In short order, our boys scored several unanswered goals. And kaboom, best behavior went out the window. The opposing coach began barking at his players and the referee, and his players' shoulders slumped. In due course, as expected, the opposing team found its groove and started to score at will, overtaking our lead and then some. Yet the opposing coach continued to bark. In due course, the opposing team found its groove and started to score at will, overtaking our lead and then some. Yet the opposing coach continued to bark. All the while, Don paid the opposing coach and the score no mind and stayed focused on his players, addressing them firmly but respectfully as they substituted in and out. I was then and remain incredibly grateful for the example Don set that day and beyond. And I'm not the only member of my family that feels that way. Who feels that way? When I texted my son, Tom, to tell him, who's with us today, that Don had died, he replied expressing his sorrow. And with permission, I quote how he closed his reply as follows. Undoubtedly, Don was the best youth coach I had in terms of what his ambitions were, to make sure everyone played and everyone learned. As I was assembling my thoughts for today, I read an article about this year's NCAA's Women's National Championship. The coach shared that she has struggled with this year's team as compared to the one she coached last year to the Final Four. Because this year's team was younger, had little big game experience, and in some ways was less coachable and harder to discipline. South Carolina's coach Dawn Staley went on to say that while standing her ground on her core values, she learned to accept her players' identity and meet them where they were. She was quoted as saying, "They play loose, they play free." In my heart and mind, there would be no more fitting remembrance of Coach Seymour than having the boys and girls he coached channeling him when they coached their children, as I think Coach Staley was unknowingly doing in the article. Leave the D1 and full ride noise and all the barking to others, and let them play loose and free. Thank you for hearing me out, and please allow me to close by sharing the Brewster and Q family's deepest hope that Dawn is resting in peace.
I am Don's friend. I love this man. I am so sad at his passing. I'm also sad at the suffering he endured and the suffering he caused in the last years of his life. We are here today to hold Don, to hold his family, and to hold each other. His love endures. We're also here to honor his life, to sing his praises, and to tell a few stories. Deb asked me to speak with a number of his friends, and then to offer our collective feelings about this very special man. And what an emotional journey this was for me to speak with many of you. If you have shared your memories with me, I say thank you. If you have not, please offer them to each other, or give me a call, and we can talk about Don. This will help his love endure. But first, let me offer a few of my own memories of Don. I remember Don as a big softy. He was warm and friendly and loving. I was lucky to get to know Don's tender heart. Not that he always wore it on his sleeve, but that I felt it as he so often sat and talked with me over breakfast at the Swanton Street Diner. I also knew his dry humor, which he offered up with a slightly mischievous twinkle in his eyes and a slight nod of his head. You probably all remember that. He was a fun guy to hang out with. He also looked at you when he spoke. You felt the full focus of his genuine attention and affection. And after all, what more can we offer each other but our full and undistracted attention? Don was my friend, but he was also our friend. As I spoke with many of his friends, there were a number of very common attributes, some of which have been spoken about already, that emerged. And as such, I've organized the following words by these admirable qualities. His friends spoke of his presence, that he was a good listener, and he was always interested in others. And another offered, Don had a genuine interest in what was going on with me and my family. They spoke of his humor, which we've heard about. All thought he laughed easily and loved to make his kids laugh. One spoke of a more subtle humor when he said, quote, sometimes all you can do is smile at something, and we would do this with a shared sense of quiet enjoyment, unquote. They spoke of his commitment to his children, which we've heard about already, and other youth. All of the friends said he was very proud of you, and we heard a lot of bragging. Someone noticed that he was a gentle father. We've heard that earlier today. Another offered this quote, which I've enjoyed. So it surprised me to learn that the age he preferred was newborns. I have a clear memory of him proudly carrying infant Sam in the crook of his elbow like a football, right here in this church. There was also high praise about his passion for youth sports that is well documented in other speakers here tonight. One dad said of his coaching, he was calm and knowledgeable soccer educator and taught my son and me a love for the game, and me a love for the game. And lastly, another quote was, it was clear to us that Deb and Don had raised the kids to be outstanding people. That's a direct quote. Another comment thread was his sense of adventure. Quote, he was always up for an adventure, and one friend after another said there was a certain wildness about Don. He was an explorer. I heard about his epic trips to Mount Washington with Thad, and something about dirt sprinkled on a pizza, and scuba diving lessons with Sam, and something about who passed the exam first. We've heard about the music, his passion for music. The quotes I heard were, music was in his soul, and that he was always open to new music. And of Don the athlete, we all knew, all of us friends, that he was in great shape. He even competed in triathlons because of Barbara's interest in the sport. It's also rumored that you had to teach him how to swim. And of the working Don, we would often compare notes of being a solo consultant. And I learned and came to respect his consulting to healthcare boards and on issues of governance. He taught me a lot about governance. And he was much in demand for speaking at conferences. He even wrote white papers that were widely distributed. They spoke of him as being serious and damn good at his job. And one last comment was he often volunteered his expertise. One friend raved about his help for medical missions for children and called Don soft-spoken, a great listener, and a great human being. And lastly, he was very dedicated to this church. Friends reported that he felt home here. He felt loved. Many of us know that Deb and Don served willingly and tirelessly on church committees, and we all know what kind of effort that takes. They also taught the youth program here called Our Whole Life, which is a well-known lifespan sexuality course for 7th and 8th graders. He approached church leadership with humor. I heard a story of him working for the pledge committee, and he got Sam to juggle going up and down the aisle. And lastly, a longtime church member wrote this that summarized all our feeling, quote, "We are blessed to have had him, Deb, and the Seymour family as part of our community." There were way more wonderful comments than I have time to share this afternoon. I do wish he was here to listen to all these great things people had to say about him. He was clearly loved and respected. To Deb and all you kids and the family, please know we are holding you today and for many decades to come. His love endures.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim Shellman. I'm Deb's brother, and we are both siblings and friends. And ours is a particularly close friendship for which I am grateful beyond words. So I offer this reflection this afternoon on my own behalf, of course, but also my wife, Andrea, who wishes she could be here, and for my several siblings who knew and loved Don. And I don't want to do it this way. Life is full, simply full of paradox, of seemingly contradictory moments and values. And this is nowhere more evident than in the human heart and the behaviors that rise from it. Now, we all know this in our honest moments, and those are probably too rare about our own hearts. So as we have heard, Don's life was simply full of paradox. A gentle, generous, and thoughtful man who could also be self-centered, thoughtless, and in his last years, even cruel, when his demons got the better of him. The mystery of his deep woundedness was the current that flowed beneath all of these seemingly contradictory moments. Now, we each bear our wounds, and we do so with mixed success. Don bore his with less and less success over the years. Those of us who loved him felt his abiding grief, but we were maddeningly unable to help. So, one memory for me was, I think, one of Don's most generous and loving moments, and that is in the aftermath of his father's hard death. At the funeral, Don struggled to grasp what had happened, and to offer us a vision of his Father's last moments and a dialogue between an accompanying angel and his dad. In the end, the angel lost, and Don's own demons won. His father's own demons won. My friends, we know that Don tried and tried again, but in the end, his long pain won, and he slipped away. So I choose damn it, I didn't want to do this. So I choose to remember the many times when he won the battle. The generosity and kindness he showed me in so many. And I believe with all my heart and soul that this man rests now as his paradoxes are resolved, and he is becoming his better self in the presence of the one who never ceased to love him and loved him best. I believe that this oh so wounded soul is now loving each of us more freely and truly than he ever could in this life. This dear man, husband, brother, father, grandfather, uncle, friend.
I invite us into the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, God of those who love and mourn, we bear witness to the life of Don Seymour, a life of joy, triumph, and struggle, of illness and vitality, of promises made, promises broken, new promises hoped for by so many, including Don himself. A complex life too profound to be fully understood, a life that has ended, and a life that may never feel complete. In the wake of his physical death, may our ties endure in their own way. May there be new healing, understanding, and growth in the fullness of time, by nature's own sense of seasons. And when we miss Don and struggle with the truth of his path in life, may we find kindness and strength within this gathered circle. May we find our own way to remember all that is good about Don Seymour and continue to practice these virtues in the time that remains for us. May his memory be blessed. May all those who remember him know they forever dwell in the circle of his love. We ask this in the name of all that is holy. Amen. Let us now close our time together with one final blessing. That which is worthy of doing, create with your hands. That which is worthy of repeating, speak with a clear voice. That which is worthy of remembering, hold in your hearts. And that which is worthy of living, go and live it now. Go in peace. Amen.